there's a spectacle to the handstand because like the blueprint of your world changes as soon as you go upside down. Like there's a serious psychological aspect to the practice. You are going to come up against yourself at some point, and how you manage that is integral to whether you advance or not. You know, flexibility is important, strength is important, technique is incredibly important. It's complex, and there's always something else that you can improve on. And I think that makes this kind of journey really fascinating.
Welcome to another episode of Moving Mindset. In today's episode, I'm interviewing Harry J. Banks, a handstand flexibility and movement coach from Barcelona. We talk a lot about mindset, about handstands, and personal stories. Also about myself that I never really publicly shared on the internet before. It's going really deep, so buckle up and let's get right into the episode. Harry, amazing to have you on the podcast. Welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. Good morning. Good. I'm doing very good. Even more better to be here with you.
Amazing. Heartwarming. We talked a little bit before and I said I tried to do some research on you and I didn't find much apart from your Instagram. On your Instagram, we can see you doing crazy stuff like the Middlesplits on boxes, like going full Van Damme, or like crazy one-arm handstands and crazy strength stuff. So I would like to hear a little bit about your personal story. Like, how did you come to this crazy point and what made you push to this point? Because it's not like people start, okay, I want to learn a handstand, but then to go to this level, how did you get there?
Absolutely, yeah. How did I get here? It's been long, I suppose. So I started in 2017. I'd moved to Barcelona. And as a child, I wasn't a gymnast. I wouldn't call myself a gymnast, but I'd done gymnastics. And I kind of enjoyed it from 8 till around 11. And at 11 years old, I stopped. Not because I stopped enjoying it, but because I think puberty started and I put on some weight. And in the gymnastics school that I went to, it was like a really old school, pretty cheap one. And so when we used to do competitions, everyone would have their leotards on and we'd just have like a white t-shirt and black short, like very scruffy compared to all the other schools. And one year, I don't know, maybe we got some funding from somewhere, but all of a sudden these leotards turned up and it was like this blue, obviously it's like skin tight. I'd kind of just hit puberty, put on a little bit of weight, it's a bit of a chubby 11-year-old and put on this thing and was just like, oh my God, I look estate. I felt so embarrassed, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of sad, and went home and told my parents, okay, I don't know if I'm enjoying gymnastics that much anymore. And it wasn't because I'd stopped enjoying it, it's just because I felt really insecure and underconfident in this leotard that we'd now had. Anyway, that was the start of the story. Then the teenage years, I've kind of disconnected from my body, disconnected from any physical practice. Moved to Barcelona in 2016, started practicing again, but with no real structure. I'd boxed for some years, I'd been to the gym, and so the physical was kind of always really present in my life, but without any real direction, let's say. And so I found a center here which taught hand balance and gymnastic strength classes. And at the time I was new to Barcelona, I didn't really speak Spanish. I was working a reception job in this school that I wasn't particularly keen on, and it was terribly paid, but it's like, I want to be in Spain, I want to be in Barcelona, this is exciting. And it kind of permitted me to train on a morning. And so I found this center and was training hand balance and gymnastic strength training. It's interesting, at the time I had to choose between the two practices because I didn't have the money to pay for both classes. So it was like gymnastic strength or hand balance. And I went with gymnastic strength training. And so if you scroll down on my Instagram, you'll see most of the videos from the start are like terrible quality and they're just some stuff on the rings. There's very little handstand stuff until one day I think I did an intensive in the summer with the guys. Charlie and Anna, they were called. I think it's important to mention them. Anna, who now runs the Bamboo Body, and Charlie, who teaches movement here in Barcelona. They both really, really helped me and guided me to a certain level. And so I would train on the morning, go and sit at reception in the afternoon. And eventually it's like, oh, hang on a minute. I love this. This is great. And like you put the work in and, oh, there's a little improvement here. And you start proving to yourself that you can be better at it, invest a little bit more time in it. And I think perhaps I've maybe got a slightly obsessive personality, but eventually it kind of became, right, I'm not going to go out on Friday and get pissed instead because I want to train on Saturday, you know, and then food being important, diet being important, feeling good being important, having the energy being important to do this practice, which became really integral in my day-to-day kind of life. And then I went to Argentina. I was very fortunate to go and to practice in different circus centers in Argentina and Buenos Aires. Was going to go for a few months and stayed for a year and a half. Just because the like quality of coaches there I found to be amazing, and the life in Buenos Aires is just fascinating, just like an amazing adventure and experience. And then came back during the pandemic, have been training, started teaching, and ever since it's just been this thing that started as a hobby, as a thing I was just testing out, has kind of become my life. And now I teach and I coach and I train, and my Monday to Sunday is that. And so it's a real privilege. It's a really beautiful, long may it last. Yeah, it's really beautiful, man.
I love that because I actually also plan to go to Argentina. There were so many loops that opened. Maybe start with the first one. I saw the other day on your stories that you were training also with a teacher, probably in Barcelona. Was it this sort of circus training then, or was it more gymnastics training?
It was circus, but it was quite specific to hand balance. And so even though it was circus and within like a circus center, and hand balance is obviously an integral part of circus, it's also, I think, these days kind of a physical practice outside of that. Like a lot of people undertake the practice that aren't really interested in circus or aren't interested in performing. They just want a physical practice that is challenging, that is different compared to, I don't know, going to a commercial gym and just lifting weights. And although I think the roots are in circus, it's become much more accessible for people outside of that, which is great, which is really good. As a result, it's kind of strayed away from the old school way. I mean, I suppose yoga's done a lot for that as well, because once you get slightly more advanced in yoga, it's something that people see and want to do. And I think because at first when you see it, it always seems quite spectacular. When I was training with these guys in Barcelona, I don't think I'd ever seen anyone do a handstand before. I wasn't really sure what it was. And I went and was in a class of gymnastic strength training, and the other coach at the time, Charlie, was just doing some side bending on two arms, going from this. And I have this image in my head still, because I remember where I was in the gym and looking over and just being blown away, just being like, wow, I want to do that. And in hindsight, it wasn't super advanced, just two arms and side bending. But at the time for me, it was like, wow, something to really aspire towards. And that was where the spark was kind of lit. I think in yoga, it's become quite big. It seems there's a spectacle to the handstand, that I think people want to achieve. And so it's kind of blown up a little bit, I suppose, which is great, As a coach, obviously, it's great because there's more people to kind of connect with and coach. And as a practice, I think it's wonderful because I think it's a really interesting and quite unique practice because it's really multifaceted. It's not go to the gym and get big. Like there's a serious psychological aspect to the practice. As you all know, like you are going to come up against yourself at some point, and how you manage that is integral to whether you advance or not. Flexibility is important, strength is important, technique is incredibly important. And so there's lots of branches to this tree, which is hand balancing, but it's complex and there's always more to do. There's always something else that you can improve on. And I think that makes this kind of journey really fascinating.
The handstand is almost like this puzzle that everybody has pieces ready and has other certain pieces to work on, right? So when we worked on the handstand, what you told me was I have a very flexible spine, which likes to move in all type of directions.
The beautiful spine.
A beautiful spine, good old spine. But the problem with that is that I have to put extra effort to keep the spine straight. Whereas
Right.
other people who are maybe like, let's say some calisthenics bros that are super jacked and they just have this very strong upper body, but it's not very flexible. And they have to work on maybe opening up the lats first to go in this sort of side bending motion. You have to really connect with your body. There's some general tips like, okay, do this, shoulders over hands, whatever. But you have to, for your body, what works, what brings me into position, and some cue that might work on me with your next student, it might be like, they're like, what are you saying? And then you say something else and all of a sudden it clicks, right? So, and you have all the branches except for maybe like pulling strength, you have it covered, right? For example, especially when I work with beginners, they tend to get sore legs at first when they start practicing handstands, which is super like non-intuitive, but it's really about like tension in the whole body, opening up, and it really shows you your weak links, right? So if, for example, my external rotation is really lacking, that's something I got to work on. And it reflects in my handstands. It shows me again and again, okay, you need stronger shoulders, open your shoulders more. It's a super, super interesting topic to me.
Right. Just as an awareness practice, for people that aren't necessarily that interested in like taking handstands to a really advanced level, just as an awareness practice, I think it's amazing because like the blueprint of your world changes as soon as you go upside down. And so understanding how to isolate maybe your shoulders and move your hips, or any of the stuff we might do as prep, being able to isolate the hips and move the rib cage really gives you this deep understanding of your own body and how to use it. And from experience, that translates into so many things. That one of those things just being a real confidence, like understanding your body and knowing how to use it results in confidence, pretty much universally, and then that you can take, whether it be deeper into hand balancing or into yoga or whatever it may be, which is just at least priceless in my mind.
100%. You also mentioned the importance of teachers. And the same as you remember the guy in your gymnastics gym doing the side bends, I also found my first teacher back when I was studying in another town in Germany, in Hanover. His name is Lucas, still a good friend of mine to today. At that point, he was doing like some fingertip support. So moving his weight on one hand and then only on the fingertips on the other hand, which is also like the entrance to the one-arm handstand, but to a total beginner, it's like, whoa. Then I just approached him and sort of became his Sith Lord disciple. Sort of, I was at that time not very disciplined. I was smoking a lot of weed, partying a lot, but he would always call me up at like 10 in the morning, be like, hey, Enes, want to train? He was keeping me on track.
Yeah, sometimes those figures, and I think we all have them, those people that we're able to kind of look to for inspiration, whether it be with their practice, how they confront their business. And I think those people are really important, or at least have been for me now, which is why, again, I think the role of a coach is so important. You have an opportunity as a coach to really affect someone and their life. It's not just about the practice, because you learn so much in the practice that then carries over to how you are, how you behave, how you view life and yourself day to day. Which is why the job is, at least in my opinion, should be taken really seriously. Like, the value that you can give to people when done properly is insane. It's immense, because you really can affect lives. But people have to be well receiving to it. Some people don't want it, of course, like it's complex. But for the people that do, it can be really amazing, though. I've had loads of people, and they come and they go. Charlie, at the time, Charlie in Barcelona, massive shout out to him. Like I say, if I hadn't seen him, maybe things would have been different if I hadn't seen him in that moment doing that thing. And he was probably he was just turning up another day to his practice, and just some random dude saw him and got mad inspired. And my life in the last 7 years has been totally different as a result of that. And then other people, Harry Williams, who I'm being currently coached by, amazing practitioner and coach, and someone that I find lots of inspiration from. Joachim Hilderson, who you know as well, who's also here in Barcelona. Sasha, who taught me hand balancing when I was in Buenos Aires. Loads of people who have like a really profound effect on and who without perhaps you wouldn't be where you are now. And so I think it's always really important to recognize that and give those people the dues. Also, because as coaches, if you're really interested in making people's lives different, like, and knowing we don't share these things that often. And so like sharing it and saying it so that the people know it, I think it's also really, really important.
It's interesting that you say that, because I'm also at the verge of being coached by Harry Williams. I'm super excited for it. A coach that, like, my prior coach was also coached. Everybody's getting coached by everyone. And my prior coach was also coached by Harry Williams. And he said, like, it's a combination between a Buddhist monk, boot camp, and jackass. That's how he described it. So I'm looking forward to that.
Harry's just, I think there's few people that are as interested and dedicated in the craft as Harry. And I think for me, it's been a real interest. It's been eye-opening and really interesting to have him as a guide.
How would you say has you being a coach influenced your life and your practice? For example, for me already, I've made some massive progress in my practice with 2 or 3 tips that you gave me in 2 sessions. But the other side of it, like, how did being a coach influence your life and your practice?
Amazing. First and foremost, amazing. I'm really pleased to hear that, that those have benefited you. Given that we didn't spend a massive amount of time together, that's wonderful. I think it's complex. I was thinking about this the other day, like how you learn as a practitioner, because I suppose first and foremost, I was a practitioner that just like got obsessed and got deep into the practice and then started teaching, really enjoyed it, kind of saw the value that you can have, and was like, oh, this is actually really wonderful, amazing. Imagine if I could like live like this. What a privilege that would be, to be able to offer value to people. So learnings. So I was thinking about how you learn and like the different avenues. So you learn via coaching or by being coached. Where does the information come from? Which is why since I've started, I've had a coach in something. I think that's invaluable to learn from someone else, because there's always stuff to learn, even if it's just around best practice. And actually, that's maybe not the best way of doing things. Okay, noted. Let me make sure I don't do that with my students. Generally, that's not the case. If you find good coaches and make sure you're willing to pay for good coaches, if you've got the money available, no. Generally, a lot of the information is gold. And so, whether it comes to specifics and small details of certain exercises or how you might structure programming for others. But in terms of avenues of learning, so coaching, your own practice, like you learn a vast amount just like being with yourself, experimenting, trying things out. Does this work? What happens if I try this same exercise but close my shoulders? Because some people aren't capable of opening their shoulders. And so how would it feel for them? No, just trying to be very empathetic and experimenting with your body to see how that can work for other people. Because you've only got your body. So you've got to become very, I think, inquisitive to understand other people, because it can be difficult. Which, I mean, it's typical. No, gymnasts that have done gymnastics from a child tell you, and like you've seen on Instagram, 3 exercises to get your Middlesplits, and they had no process of learning it. They just know it, and it's nonsense, you know. Or like there's no understanding of how you learn, and I think that's also something. There's something to be said there for adults learning the skill rather than children learning it, because you have to understand it to really learn it. As a child, you don't need to understand it. Your body will just pick it up once you've gone through the repetition. Like, we know this. And as an adult, for your body to be able to integrate the information, understanding the why is super important. Otherwise, I mean, maybe it's possible, but you'd take fucking 10 times the amount of time. And so there's a certain amount of information that you acquire by sitting with yourself, practicing, trying to understand how you can make it work. And okay, that didn't work right. Why didn't it work? What can we do better next time to try and ensure that it does work? And so coaches, your own practice, and then coming back to what you said, your students, you know, you learn so much by teaching and by seeing what works for your students and how they respond and asking them questions. Your students really are your greatest teacher in so many ways, because their experience is all valid. And sometimes they might feel it a certain different way, but that gives you a lot of information that you then acquire and are able to kind of use when you're teaching with other students. Oh shit, yeah, someone has actually experienced that. Okay, how are we able to kind of confront that issue or resolve it? Yeah, get involved. Like, if you want to coach, get involved as soon as possible, because the information that you get from, or just for people in general, the information you get from people, as long as you use it wisely, is also invaluable, just as valuable as the stuff you get from your own practice and the stuff you get from coaching.
The other day, I was also having an interview with Mindset of Theo, and he said the example, okay, he's doing all these crazy flips and stuff, and he was always a football player, so he always had this explosive strength. But there are some people that can't jump, they just can't jump. So how do we actually bridge this gap of like, okay, I have to imagine, how would I learn to jump? Same for you, what you said, right? With the closing the shoulders. So I love this, like, being the eternal student, sort of, right? And adapting this mindset of always being open to learn new things, even though, like, I think, I don't know who said it, but the moment I heard it in some podcast, but the moment you think you got things figured out is the moment you're basically
100%. Also, because the more you go into the practice and the deeper you go, the more you realize that you probably will never get to where you want to be. And so you have to understand it as a process rather than as an objective. We get so invested into objectives, whether it be like the one arm or the handstand press, and actually like changing the perspective and understanding that I know it's kind of cliche and we say it a lot, but it really is about the process and about the things that you can do and find out along the process. I did gymnastics from those years that I told you. I didn't have any fear of kicking up to handstands. For me, it was just like, okay, I'm going to just fall over, but like I can fall over. I'd done a lot of cartwheels. And I've trained hundreds of people who really get paralyzed by that. And at first, it's quite hard to empathize, because if you've never experienced that, you really don't know. And so you've not experienced that. And then also, like, the lens through which you're looking at that thing is totally different, because they're paralyzed by this fear. And so how you then go around that, or how you get them to kind of confront that is different to your experience, because you never had it. And so you have to be inquisitive, and you have to then ask questions and really try and think about the best way for this person to then get over that, to be able to kind of conquer it, as it were. And at first it's complex. I mean, there's obviously certain things you can do, but again, it's also like the more you coach, the more you realize, okay, these things generally work, but there's sometimes just a case that will come in and be like, oh shit, okay, like back to the drawing board, you know? The information is there and the information is good, but there are often moments in which it's like, you thought you had it, you thought you knew it all, you don't. Like, get back to the books, as it were. And so I think that, again, just like the practice, it's always very humbling if you're open, I think, to being wrong and learning more, then there's always more to take on.
Admitting being wrong is really a skill, like to learn that, okay, this is not going to kill me if I say, wait, I don't know. Like if a
Right.
student asks, yeah, how do I do this? I don't know. I have to get back, maybe study it a little bit, and then I can get back at you. But at the moment, I don't know. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's something that when I started, I'd have really struggled with. And I think it's something that you learn with time and also with confidence. You're not expected to know everything, and that's fine. And actually saying I don't know sometimes is better. Like, I will think about this. Let me see if I can ask some people, and I'll come back to you and see if I can find out. I'll do my best to find out. No, because people don't expect you to be perfect, and often what you might otherwise do is in the moment blurt out something, and then after just go, "Oh, I've done this." Like, I'm sure most people as coaches have done this. Oh no, like that's not the case. What have I said? And you've just given someone the incorrect information or information that might not be the most useful. And
Yeah.
actually, like, just saying, let me think about this, I'll come back to you next week, and then you can give them something of value instead. It takes confidence, and I think it takes time, but people on the whole don't expect you to have all the information. Everyone's human, and I think you can get really like lost in being trying to be the best you can possibly be. But it's like with programs, like every program that someone writes for someone else is a best guess. There's no perfect program, and when you come back to the individuality and the nuance of things, there is no perfect way to do the practice, and there's no perfect program. It's just the best guess. And so this is where I suppose being an inquisitive student and asking questions and exploring yourself, the stuff that you're given, is super important. But yeah, there's no perfect program. It's all best guesses with all the information and knowledge and experience that each person has acquired. And some of those best guesses are very good, but they're still best guesses.
It's not like the universal truth. You've touched on training programs and this feedback with students. I would be interested in what is your training sort of philosophy and how do you guide your students? Like, how do you get your students from A to B? I mean, I know this is a very general question, but
Right. It varies. It varies so much because also human beings and this is something I think about all the time, because human beings are so different in so many ways. And so I was actually listening to something yesterday that was talking about just different personality types, introverts and extroverts, and how as a coach to kind of best guide them, and just little things like novelty in practice and how that should be incorporated, because you want to make sure that consistency is key. No, and sometimes, particularly with hand balancing, there's a certain amount of repetition that just needs to be done, and it might be that you're doing one exercise for 6 months. It might be that you're doing it for more, and so it takes a certain personality type to be able to commit to that and say, okay, I'm going to do this same exercise however many times a week for 6 months, because you are going to get bored, you are going to get frustrated, and some days you're not going to want to do it, but like just turning up and doing it is important. And it was saying that certain personality types need more novelty, and therefore like understanding personality types and seeing someone when they're starting to struggle and go, okay, let's just take a pause and introduce something new so that you can kind of relight the fire. And then when you see that they're kind of riding the wave again, then you can go, okay, let's kind of reintroduce this thing that's necessary. No, it needs to be done. We need to go through this process. And so understanding people and talking with people and having conversations, again, like the students are necessary to give you this information, because particularly when things are online and you don't have that same connection face to face, it can be hard to get to know them. But getting to know them means understanding how to best coach them, and that requires, I think, a lot of question asking, and again, just a lot of being inquisitive. Like, how does that exercise feel to you? How are you feeling on that day? Do you feel like you're seeing progress? Okay, if you're not, like, are you really understanding the exercise? Because there's a what, a why, and a how for everything. Like, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And how do I do it? And I say this to all my students, like, if I don't understand those three things, stop and ask, because if I can have that information, it's much more likely that I'm able to then implement it and learn, why I've done this before. Like, I'm doing this exercise, but I'm not really sure why when I started, because I didn't have the confidence to ask. And in the end, it's easy to lose the motivation when you don't really understand the purpose behind the things you're doing. And so asking those questions, and because why, there should be a why behind everything that we give as coaches. And then if you can understand the why, then it's much more likely that you're going to be motivated to then do it. And if it's there, I want you to do it to get you from A to B. I'm doing a lot of research on psychology at the moment. And I was having this conversation with a friend the other day, like when it comes to layers of importance, if there was like a pyramid of what people need to be successful when it comes to the practice, I always talk about, okay, we build a foundation of strength. Even though handstands is a technical drill, you have to have that foundation of strength to be able to come away from the wall and just manage time, right? Then there's technique, and okay, you've got the kick up. But like underneath all of that is the psychology of the individual, like their motivation and discipline and capacity to do the work. And so as a coach, like the other stuff is important, and I need to be able to have the exercise and explain to you the what, the why, and the how. But if I'm not also able to manage the bottom layer, the mindset and motivation, then there's a certain limitation there. And that is what really fascinates me. Like how you can, particularly online, how you can get someone to keep going, or how you can motivate someone from distance, or give them the information, or give them the information, or create the settings in which they can motivate themselves at a distance. Yeah, man, who knows the answer? I don't know what the answer is, because it just varies so much from person to person. Some people need it more than others. Some people will just are happy to do the same drill and really try and understand what mastery means when it comes to that drill and precision. Some people will do it for a little bit of time and will just start banging their head against the wall. And so you can either say, oh, it's not for you. Like maybe it's not for you. And maybe it isn't for that person. But also maybe then as a coach, how can I then get this person further along the road? And then it becomes about psychologically what we can do, whether it be introducing novelty or more play or trying to find a training partner. There's loads of variables though that you can kind of use to make things slightly more interesting, or change the stimulus to get people to keep going. So yeah, it's fascinating. Although of course at the end of the day, like you are as a coach, a facilitator, and you're not there to do the practice for someone else. Like your progress is not my responsibility. It's your responsibility. And I think that's true for all coaches. I heard someone say this the other day about how their students' progress was their responsibility, and I thought that's bullshit, because you can't do the work for someone else, when it comes to anything. And so you can give them the information, try and create the right settings and circumstances, but like you can't put in the reps for that person. And I think I've just gone waffled on. I find it fascinating, and I think I've just spoken to you for about 10 minutes.
No. I love it. I'm all about it, for real, to get an insight, because that's what the aim of this podcast is, more or less. You see all these people doing all this crazy stuff, like maybe someone stumbles upon your page and you're there in the Van Damme split doing that, and the people just see the end result, but they don't see the process that got you, the 7 years that you put in,
Right.
grinding. You're grinding and working your ass off, and they just see the end result. And for me, it's very interesting to get insight into the mind of somebody who's clearly put in the reps, who's clearly put in the work, and to just see, okay, because even though we all make different journeys, it somehow always comes back to the same principles, right? There's this book,
Right.
I don't know the English name. If I translate it from German, it's You Don't Have to Be Liked by Everyone. It's like a philosophical debate book. And there's this one sentence, like, you can guide a horse to the water, but it has to drink itself. It has to drink for you. You can't make the horse drink. And it's exactly what you said, right?
100%.
If you don't know, I love this analogy, because like this was really like a key insight for me right now, what you said, like the what, why, and the how, of course with your students, but also with yourself, right? So in my self practice, like, why am I even doing it? Because exactly what you said, I am very goal oriented at the moment. Like my goal is to learn the 1 arm handstand, and I can feel myself getting closer and closer, but there are these moments where I really don't want to practice, where I'm really like, oh, and where I already know that, okay, once I'm able to do it, it will be maybe like for 1 day, 2 days, it will be this feeling of, yeah. And then it will be like, what now? Like,
Right.
what comes now, right?
Right. But and it might not even be that. It might not even be that, because it might be that you get 2 seconds and you have a moment, but you go, but hang on a minute. In reality, what I need is 5 seconds. And then you do the work and you get 5 seconds and you go, but hang on a minute. In reality, what I needed was 10 seconds. And now you've got used to 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, wait, hang on. Once you get the 10 seconds, then you get 10 seconds. And during that process, because again, it takes time, you go, well, in reality, what I wanted was in straight. And so,
Yeah. Yeah.
that happens all the time, which is why, again, it's really important to be able to like stop and review and go, like actually look where I've come, because otherwise you just end up sometimes going so deep into it and not having those moments of reflection. And so I think those are really important. But yeah, like I say, it might not even be that. I remember thinking one arm amazing, and like I can wake up and do a one arm now, but the kind of the value has changed. And I think that about other things, although I think again my mindset has had to change. Perhaps it's changed, and perhaps it's also had to change as a result, because like whatever it may be, if it's always object focused, you're never going to get to where you want to be, because there's always something else. And you can just go down that tunnel of I want this, I want this, I want this, and you can do the work and get there. But the reward or the experience that you have during that process kind of changes, rather than just being like, this is fucking beautiful, man. The capacity of my body and the things I can do with my body now are amazing. Like I'm just going to turn up and really enjoy it and do things that I really want to do things that give me joy, whether that be because the psychological feeling, the physical feeling. Yeah, man. I've just lost my train of thought again.
Happens, man, happens. But it's always so humbling to achieve. Like there's also, they made studies on this. If you, let's say you have this goal, like let's say the one arm handstand, which is a very long-term goal, but let's say I get it in a couple of months, then all this dopamine will get released in my brain. It's going to be like a party in here. And then because all the storage, let's call it like that, is so much depleted, the next 1 or 2 days will be really tough. It will be really tough to
Right.
do anything. Like we all know this from experience probably, but there's been studies on it. And to realize this, and it's like I'm not religious at all, but also in Buddhism, it's like, yeah, life is suffering and don't cling and don't like the pursuit of happiness leads to suffering. And that's actually what it is. Like, of course, I'm not saying don't be happy, right? That would be a terrible thing to say. It's very important to be happy and to honor the happiness, but to not cling to it and be like, yeah, today is an
Right.
awesome day, but I know there's gonna be shitty days, and it's gonna be shitty at some point, and but still to find this, to have this why am I doing this, to not fall into this pit of nihilism and be like, okay, if I'm not gonna be happy forever anyways, like why even do it? But be more like,
Right.
okay, why do it? Exactly, that is the question, right? Like why even do it? I would like to make a loop with or close the loop, because you said you moved to Barcelona, right? Like
Right.
how did that happen? You're originally from Great Britain. Why Barcelona?
After studying, I just got an office job in London and worked in this office job for a couple of years, which was pretty well paid. It was okay. It was just sort of okay. I'd wake up and go for a run before work. I had a girlfriend at the time. It was just all kind of very comfortable. But I was in my early 20s still, with kind of a desire to travel, I think, a little bit more. And I quit the job, was like, I need a change. Barcelona I'd been to a couple of times and felt very enchanted by the city and the vibe, the beach, the climate, particularly as a Brit. Like going somewhere where there's blue skies the majority of the time is like, wow, spectacular. And so moved over, did a Spanish intensive course for a month to try it out. At the time, it was before Brexit, so it was very easy to move around. Really loved it and was like, I want to be here for more time. I was fortunate enough that one of my friends at the time worked in a place where they could offer me a job, even though it wasn't a job that I was particularly passionate about. It kind of paid my rent and my life. And as I say, as a result of that job, which actually in hindsight I have to be very thankful for, because if I hadn't been for that job and the hours and the money that job would give me, maybe again I wouldn't be where I am now, even though it was a shit job. But I was able to learn Spanish and work and live, and it's just like the years have passed, and I'm still here, and it's a great city with a bloody great climate as a Brit. I say. And it's really nice, and particularly with online work, in the industry these days, if you can work online, you can live here in Barcelona and have a really great life. And so I'm very privileged to be able to do that.
I feel like Barcelona also At least what I've seen right now, there's been lots of videos of, I think Yassir was in Barcelona, right, with you guys
Right,
training, Joachim,
right.
and like it's sort of becoming a hotspot, right?
Yeah, big shout out to those two gentlemen. It's really nice to have. It doesn't have to be like a whole group. I was in Perth in November, and just to be around the community in Perth was amazing. There's just so many high level, very dedicated human beings that are wonderful human beings, and to spend time there was amazing. It's quite rare that I think you find a community that's one that big and two that dedicated. Here in Barcelona, currently we're hanging out much more, and it's again really inspiring to be around people, even if it's not necessarily the same disciplines, but to see people that are that dedicated and that interested in the craft. And so finding that community is super important. Like a lot of this stuff you can do by yourself, and I think a lot of people do a lot of it by themselves. And I'm guilty of spending a vast amount of time by myself. And I wouldn't necessarily change that, but I think also without that human interaction, things can become very disconnected. And so having people that you can check in with once a week and have those kind of conversations with, because you're sharing, again, even if it's not specific to hand balancing, like you're sharing this passion for for the physical, for movement, however, whatever form that takes on. And so that's beautiful, man. It's a real privilege to have those guys around. I'm very thankful for them. And hopefully maybe it'll grow, and everyone that's ever in Barcelona just hit us up and we can get some handstands or some Middlesplits in by the beach.
Yeah, man. That's the dream. That's the dream. Movement, beach, the sun. How did it come about that you went to Argentina?
Argentina happened because one of my best friends at the time was from Argentina, and Ezekiel, a wonderful human being, and he just really spoke highly of Argentina, of the people, of just of everything. And so it kind of sparked this interest. I'm not entirely sure how the information had arrived to me that there was a lot of circus in Argentina. Anyway, I kind of contacted them, and it seemed like there was a lot on offer. And I was speaking Spanish at the time, wanted to stay in countries that spoke Spanish to be able to kind of continue to grow and develop as a Spanish speaker. And it just seemed like a great destination. My dad had been to Argentina 30 years ago, and he spoke very highly of it. And so I went. At the time, the flights weren't super expensive. Found like just a vast amount of straps classes, flexibility, contortion, done, handstands, and it was super accessible. Like the community is huge of people doing all of this stuff, and it kind of really interlinks. I've never actually known anywhere quite like Buenos Aires in that sense, where there's classes of so much and so many high level practitioners in one city, in so many different spaces, dance, acrobatics, just all sorts, capoeira, handstands. It was mad. It's really impressive. And also, fortunately, as someone that had been working in euros and pounds and saved in euros and pounds, when you travel to Argentina and the money translates to Argentinian pesos, you can generally be there for a significant amount of time. And so I tried out different classes with different coaches, found Sasha, this Russian, who was like my surrogate dad for like a year and a half. And it was like not looking back. It was just, I'm going to be here until all of my money is gone. And then I'll have to go back home. But I'd love to go back. I would love to go back as soon as possible, man. I wanted to go last year. It wasn't possible in the end. Hopefully next year I'll go back and relive it. I recommend it to everyone. The guys out there are amazing. The coaches are amazing. The spaces, it's just an amazing city.
It's interesting. There are some parallels that I see because for me, it's also this calling to learn Spanish. For me, it was not Barcelona. For me, it was Malaga, which is in Andalusia. And I spent some time there in 2019, I think. Just
Yeah.
randomly, like, I don't know even how it happened. A friend messaged me, like, hey, I'm Malaga, let's meet. And I was traveling at the time through Europe. And I immediately fell in love with the city. Then last year, I went there again for work. I was working as a retreat chef and just cooking for different retreats. And again, I felt this pull. And my whole life, I was like, I want to learn Spanish. I want to learn it. I want to learn it. And then now it's time, and sort of felt this gravitational pull towards there. And it's interesting that you bring it up now with Argentina, because I also feel like in life, there's always these. I don't know how spiritual I want to make this.
You go full spiritual. Go
All
go
right.
full you, man. Absolutely.
There's this
Don't
book.
hold back.
There's this book, El Alquimista,
Mm,
and maybe you know about it, like from
yes.
Paulo Coelho. I think it's my favorite book. It's like roughly said, it's the story about a boy having a dream and then following
Right.
the dream, like a real dream, a night sleep dream, and just finding his luck more or less.
Mm,
And the book is all about like this language of the universe. and how to learn to speak it, how to listen to it. And
Right.
ever since I've embarked on my path, okay, I quit my studies. At first, it was I want to become a yoga teacher, which I did, but it's not the ultimate end goal. Like always, new stuff keeps on coming. It's always like once you take the first step, somehow, somewhere, somebody comes and puts the next brick in
Right.
front of you for you to step on. It's always
Right.
like the road gets paved. Of course, it's not always like sunshine and rainbows, but it's always like these little breadcrumbs. And
Right.
for example, what you did right now was talk about Buenos Aires, and for me, it was like, oh wow, I maybe I should really go there because in my mind it was always like South America is a destination I have like at one point in my life, and you spoke really highly of it. So for me, this is like the next cue, the next breadcrumb, and I'm curious because from what you said, your story was, it sounded very similar. Okay, you had this friend, he offered you a job, and then you met this person, and then you went there. And in the moment, it's really like you're in a dark forest. It's very foggy. You can see only one step ahead. But if you look
Right.
back, it's almost as if it was like sort of planned or right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
can
Yeah.
you connect to that?
100%. 100%. I do think it's a certain mentality as well, though. I think it's like life happens for you or it happens to you.
Hmm.
And I think like really coming to grips with that life happens for you because it works for the beautiful moments, but also it has to work for the dark moments as well. It's not just kind of here and there. And it's like, okay, this is happening for me. Because like that being said, there's also been very dark times where when I was in Argentina and I was very much by myself and I was maybe a little bit too deep into training and I should have just relaxed.
Hmm.
There were times when I felt really lonely and felt like quite dislocated from my family. I was quite far, my friends who were here, but you go through all of that. Like it happens for you so that you can go through all of that and come out the other side. I was going to say a better person. I'm sort of hesitant to use that phrase, but like somewhat better informed perhaps of yourself and just and with perhaps a millimeter more in terms of understanding of life, just a
Hmm.
millimeter, not much more than that. And it's not always easy as well because there can be moments in which things just feel like shit and you're like, well, why is that? How can I look at it with that mentality? But I think, yeah, you trying to change the perspective, the thing that life happens for you, has been really big.
Interesting that you say that with also the dark periods, which will come up. And I feel like there was a point for the longest time in my life, life was happening to me. At some point, it just clicked and it started happening like for me. I started realizing, okay, life actually happens for me. And
When was that click for you?
oh, I would say sometime around COVID. I was like very unhappy with my studies. I was self-medicating with weed. In hindsight, at that moment, I was like, "Yeah, weed is amazing," but no, it wasn't amazing. It was just like self-medicating a deeper problem of like being unhappy with life. And oh shit, I'm studying this subject, and it's not what I want. It's what my parents want, but I think that
Right,
will make me happy, but it will not really. And then during COVID, I really got a bad back injury, and I started doing yoga, and then I also started experimenting a little bit with psychedelics. And there was this one point where I was like tripping with a friend and I was practicing yoga. And there was this epiphany, let's say, like it was almost like a truth that was whispered into my ear. You're going to become a yoga teacher. It was stronger than I thought. It was really like, I don't know how to describe it. It's really surreal, like now that I look back at it, but it happened. And I think that was like point where I really started believing, like, because there were a lot of naysayers who were like, man, you're not even flexible. Like, why man, you need to study. Like, how you gonna go to India? What's wrong? But somehow I was like,
what's
no,
wrong?
what's wrong? Yeah, what's wrong here? Why you want to go to India? But I feel like that was sort of the point where I started understanding, because that was also a point where I started consuming more podcasts and media of people who were at a point in their life where they were like, yeah, I'm self-employed, I'm traveling, whatever, and just being open to this possibility
Right.
of a different life. No, what about you? When was that point for you?
I think it's just been very gradual for me. I had this job I didn't really like, and I was training alongside it, and just little by little, it was like, okay, the next step, the next step, the next step, the next step. Oh, I can coach now. The next step. Okay, now I can coach full time. The next step. Okay, now I can like this could be my life rather than any kind of particular moment. Maybe in the future I'll end up making coffees. And the thing is, like if I'm making coffee and I've got time to train, like I'll also be super happy. it's I'm really fortunate to be able to teach, but again, like the small things have become more important in my life. And so if I can just like live and train and I've got time for that, like rock and roll. If this lasts forever, amazing. But also if it doesn't last forever, then again it will be for a reason. And as long as I'm able to move and I'm healthy, then life goes on.
Yeah. Like what more? What more, right? It's so easy to forget that, but just to be able to practice and not being like, oh, I have to train today. No, I'm able to train today,
Right.
and I'm privileged to train today, and like I am thankful for every person that came in my life, and also the good times and the bad times. And maybe a last big question, because also something that I thought about, or where I see a huge parallel between us. You talked about like this, let's say, dark period of your life, where as a teenager or maybe as a prepubescent or pubescent boy, you were a little more chubby and not practicing sports, unhappy with your body. And like, how did you manage to go through that and to overcome that? And how do you feel like, do you feel like that was an important step to get where you are right now?
I think, I suppose in terms of like significant moments, that probably for me is one of the most significant moments because I did gymnastics. I was a skinny kid until I wasn't. And it was very unclear as to where things had changed because you're not really conscious of it in that moment. Now, in hindsight, I'm like, well, you were fucking eating like shit and doing very little exercise. Of course, you put on weight, but I didn't really understand it. It was kind of confusing. I was all of a sudden this thing that I didn't really like, and that's how I was from all the way through my teenage years, which I think are quite, again, significant years in the development of us, no, of human beings, and how you experience those can really change how you are as an adult. And I spent those years, yeah, just kind of retreated into what I kind of call like a C person. And like you have the grades A, B, or C. I just kind of went through school, not very interested. Go home and play World of Warcraft. Wake up and play World of Warcraft. Try and take days off school to play World of Warcraft, and then maybe with the boys play FIFA or Call of Duty on a weekend, get some Chinese in, and that was kind of fine. Very little interest in school and life, very little inspiration, I would say. But like, why am I doing this maths thing? Like, and they'd be like, oh, it'd be important for you later in life. I'm like, will it? Why would this thing that I find so little interest in be important to me? I just don't understand it. And there was kind of nothing there at the time. It was all like, "Oh, you should do this, like English, like you should do all this stuff because it's going to be important." But I think as a young person, again, it's like if you're not really shown why it's important, if you don't see the substance behind it, it just kind of goes in one ear and through the other. And so physically I was present, but mentally I was definitely somewhere else. So I started going to the gym, kind of found the physical always, it always had power to it, the physical for me. So like I did gymnastics, yes, and that was important to me, but then I stopped doing it. Started going to the gym, was pretty big, but again, very underconfident because I think the actual doing of the thing I really enjoyed. I always enjoyed being there and being able to lose myself in it, even if it wasn't structured or I didn't have any program or there was no specificity to it. It was just like being there in the environment, feeling whatever that sensation was, the pump, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. I always saw value in that. And then eventually kind of started boxing, took that quite seriously. And then it's like, for me, it was a bit of a trivial moment, but it was like having a partner when I was in my teenage years. And I'm hesitant to call it a toxic relationship, but like not a positive relationship. Like lots of jealousy, lots of feeling insecure. Of course, like you're 16, 17 years old, you can't expect, well, it's highly unlikely that you have this sort of like amazing relationship where you communicate and you like, it doesn't generally happen at that age. It's sort of a rite of passage. You go through these things, and in the end, it was like the girl broke up with me, and I was like, oh my god, my life has ended. Like, what a terrible thing.
Yeah.
It's sort of embarrassing
I'm
when you
never
think
gonna
back, but of course,
recover from this.
right? Oh my god, life is terrible. It's sort of embarrassing when you look back, but again, it's a significant moment, and so I have to be able to accept that and go, listen, this is actually what happened to me. And as a result, I took training more seriously, and I was like, oh shit, I lost a bit of weight there. Took eating more seriously, stopped eating Mars bars, stopped drinking so much, and transformed into this guy that had a six pack. And I was like, oh shit. Like you literally spent your whole teenage years trying to get what you've just got in the last 2 months. That's mad. That was like insanely empowering. Is that if you can do this, maybe you can do other stuff because you never thought you could do anything. This was always just a dream for you. And like the reality now is that you've done that. And it's very visceral because it's like you that's done that. No one's done it for you. No one transforms your body for you. You've put the reps in to get that change, and it's very physical. It's very clear. No, you look at yourself in the mirror and you don't look that way that made you feel insecure. You now look the way that you go, and maybe on the surface it's slightly superficial, but that's like the entry point. Like no one goes, I'm going to start this practice tomorrow because I want to get deep and spiritual about it. Like people generally go, I want to look good and feel better,
Mhm.
and then maybe somewhere in the process they go, oh shit, this is like taking a bit of a turn for the positive, you know. And yeah, it was just like this realization of if you put your mind to it, you can do it. And so I went to university, and from being a C grade student, I got a first. And so this transformation of physically you can do it, maybe like academically you can also do it, or intellectually. If you really fucking want it, and if you make the decision to do it, then absolutely you can do it. And so that for me was really fundamental in terms of like the direction of my life, because it was, again, it was this insecure, underconfident child really with very little self-awareness and understanding or passion that went to like, oh wow, I felt confident, like I was driven, I was much more aware. Again, like you said, this like a period of self-development. I started reading a lot more, started listening to a lot more, started kind of trying to find inspiration in different people that had kind of been on the journey before me to see how they'd done it, and what kind of advice they might give. And so I suppose that for me was a really fundamental moment in terms of the changing of the trajectory of my life and my mentality in life, I suppose. Then one goes after the other, which kind of seems similar to yourself, no, in a sense.
100%.
Explain. I'd love to hear, because we I suppose we've not really got into detail. We kind of know it, but tell me your own story.
So for me, it was I grew up without a father, mainly. Like he was there, but not really there, you know, like my parents were divorced. So I only had my mom. She was working a lot. And I guess in hindsight, I ate a lot of candy as a child. And I guess that was also like, okay, this makes me feel good. This makes me forget where I'm at right now. What's like, I was lucky. Like whenever I wanted something, I got it. I was never lacking as a child, but like still, I feel it's very important for a child to have emotional support. And we all know that. Let's not ramble on about that. But I was eating as exactly as you said, like candy. I was not eating healthily, and I was, let's say, up to fifth or sixth grade, I was always skinny. I was always sporty and athletic. I started doing martial arts. I did karate for a long time. But at this one point, I still remember like we were in the changing room before PE class. And there were like these football guys that had like a six pack, exactly as you said. And I looked at myself and I was like, I was not fat, but I was not particularly skinny either. I was in this in between room, like a little more on the chubby side, and it deteriorated. Like at this one point, we went to the doctor. He said, I don't know how you call it in English, but you're obese, right? Like in German, it's adipositas. That's like the
Right.
name of the disease. And I was like, what? Like, hold on a second. I still remember that, like being shocked and asking my mom, like, what does it mean? And like, it was a very, I knew something was wrong, but I felt very powerless and very unable to change it. And I also spent most of my time as a child obsessively building Lego, like for hours on end. And when I grew a little older, obsessively playing video games. Every free minute I had, every free minute that I was allowed, I would spend. For me, it was everything, mainly these RPGs. Like, same, I didn't play World of Warcraft, but like also where you have to build something. You start at zero, and then over a long, arduous process, you get to this point where you're massive and you're like, you see the
Right.
difference, you see the progress. And I feel like that's what you said. I'm also a very obsessive personality where once I like something, I tend to lose myself in it. And I got to this point where I understood, okay, I have to eat differently. I remember I had this drink, this sort of milkshake. I would always empty it on the way from the supermarket to the home, and I would read how many calories it had. I would be like, wait, wait a minute. And then I remember like I would go to the fridge and take this tiniest sip of it, put it back, feeling like, okay, this is enough. Next day, another tiny sip. And this thing that I would empty in like 3 minutes lasted me almost like half a week or a week. And as you said, I lost weight and I felt more comfortable, and I was not like super ripped or anything, but I was like, hey, okay, I can change something. And then at university, I was super unhappy with my life still. Like, I started smoking a lot of weed, and I started drinking. I never drank until I was 19 or something. I started really late. And then, but then when I started, for a while, I did it really, really much,
Right.
really often. But then I understood, no, that's not for me. I always felt like, still to this day, when I drink, sometimes I drink alcohol, but my body rejects it. I feel very bad even after like one glass of wine. The next day, I tend to have a headache. And so I stuck to weed, which was better for my body, but worse for my mind. And at this one point, what I said earlier, I had this back injury. I started doing like body weight exercises, but with terrible form. I always had like sort of a lordosis of the lower back. And then I had this cracking moment where there was somebody trying to get in the train in the wheelchair. And I tried to lift it with the worst deadlift form ever. And it was like, like as in the movies. And I was like, oh, that didn't feel good. Then I started doing yoga and actually going back to the basics, building some fundamental exercises. And I also at that time switched to a plant-based diet. And because at that time I started packing on a little more weight again, because I stopped doing karate and I only smoked weed and went out partying and played video games. So I cut all that, cleaned up my diet radically, also to a point where I would say I weighed every inch of food I put on the food scale and tracked every bit like meticulously, which was interesting to learn. Okay, this has this much calories, this has this much, but it was very compulsive. And I lost
Right.
weight, and I have the photos, I have the pictures of me now, and I see like, wow, I was at like maybe 8% body fat or something. I was really, really,
Right.
really ripped, really lean. But I remember being at the mirror and being like, oh no, I still have some fat here, some fat here. Like, I had a six pack, exactly as you said, and it felt empowering on the one side, but on the other side, it was really like, I want more, I need more, still not enough, still not enough, still not enough. And this tendency is something I feel like I will always have in me
Right.
somewhere. This, like, everybody has it, but I feel like for me it's very it tends to be a little stronger. So I have to be mindful of that, be aware of that. Okay, no, now it's enough. You worked, I don't know, for example, when I gonna edit this, I tend to lose myself in it too. And then I sit there for 5 hours and then I'm like, okay, maybe, just maybe, hold on, it's time to take a break now. you
Right.
know, and like be
Right.
nice to myself. But that's basically it. And now lately I feel like it's getting more and more balanced as I'm also growing older. Like, I'm getting 26 this month. And as you said, I feel like I'm never going to get there where I want to be, but that's not the objective, right? The objective is
Right.
to, yeah,
Your
sort of,
capacity to manage it. Your capacity to manage it so that it affects you in a positive way, or you can kind of utilize it so that it affects your life in a positive way. That same
yeah,
thing, rather
exactly.
than it kind of use and take over you.
Like, maybe just to put it like that, I am not the insecure boy I was anymore, but the
Right.
insecure boy is will always be a part of me. It will always be a part of me. And in
Totally.
certain situations, one person says the wrong word, and all of a sudden, inside of me is this huge emotional reaction. But now to
Yeah.
be able to contain it and to be able to, okay,
Mm.
now this
Recognize
feels
it.
insane, but I'm gonna sit here, I'm gonna breathe through it, and it's gonna be okay, right?
Totally, man. Amazing. And you know, fucking fair play to you because there's so many people that go through life and they're not able to do that. And like it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of looking in the mirror and like recognize it first and foremost is obviously the first step. And it's like if you can utilize that, which a lot of people don't learn to, but if you can learn to utilize it for something positive, then fucking you're doing well. And so well done to you.
Amen. Thank you, man.
But it does. I felt very identified there when you like it comes up, of course, because that little dude is still there. Like I
Yeah.
will never forget being like in the shower, age 13, looking down at these rolls and going, "What the man?"
Yeah.
Devastated. Like that dude is
How did
always
they
going to
come
be
here?
there.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Like
Yeah,
it's not going anywhere, and it's
yeah,
like just like being able to use that experience and manage that uh, in a positive way going forward, and being grateful for it, I suppose, as well, because those experiences turn you into the person that you can then be, or that you are currently, or can grow to be. And like without that little guy went through that stuff to be able for me to be sat here now with some sort of introspective practice and understanding of why and how it can like positively benefit me today and for the rest of my life. But that had to happen. That little guy had to feel those things. He did,
Hero's
yeah.
journey, man. Hero's journey, for real. Harry,
Yeah, man.
it's been a fucking blast, for real.
Thank you very much for suggesting this. It's been really beautiful, man. And I feel like we could probably have gone on for a lot longer and gone
100%.
deeper into the weeds. But it's been, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the energy in the conversation. And hopefully at some other point we'll revisit.
So I'm going to put all your links in the show notes, but what would be the steps somebody who wants to work with you would have to take?
So don't go on the website because there's nothing currently. Everything's via Instagram. And so it's HJ Balancing on Instagram. Just send me a message if you are interested in finding out a little bit more. And then generally just have a conversation, a light conversation about yourself and your goals, like your history, before we can see first and foremost that I'd be an appropriate coach for you. And if that's the case, then we'll do a little assessment and take it from there.
And that concludes the episode. Let me tell you guys, Harry really knows what he's talking about. He's a really good coach. We only had 2 sessions, but I learned so much. He's really down to earth and really chill. Please go and check him out. And also, if you want to learn the handstand, check out the link in the bio for my free handstand course, the Handstand Formula. Drop a comment below what you think about the episode and let me know who you want to see next. That's it. See you guys next time.